"You useless old man. You're fired." Victoria screamed as she grabbed the mop bucket and hurled it across the marble floor. Water splashed everywhere, soaking the elderly janitor's worn shoes. Papers flew from her desk as she swept her arm across it in rage. The entire office froze. Employees peeked from their cubicles. Phones stopped ringing. Even the air conditioning seemed to hold its breath. But what this wealthy CEO didn't know was that the poor old man trembling before her, the one she just humiliated in front of everyone, was the same person who saved her life 30 years ago. The secret he carried would destroy everything she thought she knew about herself. How did this janitor become her father? What happened the day he gave her up? And what will Victoria do when she discovers the truth? If you're watching, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications because the lesson you'll learn today will change your perspective forever. Now let's begin. Victoria Okonkwo was a force of nature. At 32, she was the youngest CEO of Okonkwo Industries, the largest tech company in Lagos. She lived in a penthouse overlooking the city, drove a Range Rover that cost more than most people's houses, and wore designer clothes that could feed a family for months. But there was one problem. Victoria had no heart. Everyone who worked for her knew it. The security guards whispered about it. The cleaners gossiped about it. Even her board members secretly called her the Ice Queen behind closed doors. Every morning, she arrived at exactly 7:30, her heels clicking like gunshots on the marble floors. She never smiled, never said good morning, never acknowledged the people who scrambled to open doors for her or fetch her coffee. To Victoria, they were invisible. Tools, replacements waiting to happen. "Get out of my way," she would snap at anyone who dared stand in her path. "Do you think I have time for your incompetence?" Her assistant, a young woman named Chioma, had cried in the bathroom so many times that she kept emergency makeup in her desk drawer. The IT manager had developed an ulcer from the stress. 3 receptionists had quit in 6 months. But Victoria didn't care. She had built this empire from nothing, and she refused to show weakness to anyone. What most people didn't know was that Victoria wasn't always this way. She grew up as an orphan, raised in an expensive boarding school after being found abandoned outside St. Mary's Catholic Church as a baby. The nuns had discovered her wrapped in a faded blanket with only a handwritten note pinned to it. "Please take care of my daughter. I cannot provide for her. May God forgive me." Young Victoria had been bullied mercilessly. The other children called her charity case and nobody's child. While they received care packages from their parents, Victoria sat alone. While they went home for holidays, Victoria stayed behind with the nuns. The pain of abandonment had carved a hole in her chest that never healed. So she made herself a promise. She would never be weak, never need anyone, never show mercy. She would become so powerful that no one could ever hurt her again. And she did. She worked twice as hard as everyone else, studied while others slept, and climbed her way to the top by stepping on anyone who got in her way. Now she was untouchable, or so she thought. Meanwhile, 68-year-old Emmanuel Okafor shuffled through the glass doors of Okonkwo Industries on his first day as the night janitor. His back was slightly hunched from years of manual labor. His hands were weathered and scarred. His shoes had holes that he'd covered with cardboard. But his eyes still held kindness that poverty couldn't kill. "Good evening, my sister," he said warmly to the receptionist as he signed in. "God bless you." The young woman, surprised by his genuine smile, smiled back. "Welcome, sir. The supply room is on the 3rd floor. Thank you, my daughter. I will work hard, I promise." As Emmanuel rode the elevator up, his hands trembled slightly. Not from nervousness about the job. From something else entirely. Something that had haunted him for 30 years. That evening, Victoria stayed late working on a presentation. The office was quiet except for the sound of her typing and the occasional squeaky wheel of a cleaning cart. She was so focused on her computer screen that she barely noticed when Emmanuel entered to empty her trash bin. "Good evening, madam," he said softly, careful not to disturb her. Victoria didn't look up. She simply waved her hand dismissively as if shooing away a fly. Emmanuel stood there for a moment, his eyes fixed on her face. His breath caught in his throat. After all these years of searching, wondering, hoping, there she was, his daughter, alive, successful, beautiful, but so cold, so broken. He wanted to tell her everything right then. Wanted to fall to his knees and beg for forgiveness. Wanted to explain that giving her up was the hardest thing he'd ever done. But it was the only way to save her life. Instead, he quietly emptied the trash and walked away, tears streaming silently down his weathered face. Over the next few weeks, Victoria's treatment of Emmanuel grew worse. Started small. She would drop papers on the floor he had just cleaned and walk away without a word. Then it escalated. One evening, Emmanuel was polishing the windows in the conference room. He had been working carefully, making sure every streak was gone. Victoria walked by, glanced at his work and said, "You missed a spot. Actually, you missed several spots. Are you blind or just incompetent?" Emmanuel's hand shook as he immediately grabbed his cloth.
I'm sorry, madam.
"I will fix it right now." "Of course you will. That's your job, isn't it? Or do you need me to teach you how to clean a window?" Her voice dripped with contempt. The security guard who overheard the exchange later told Chioma, "I don't understand why she hates that old man so much. He's the hardest working person here. He never complains, never asks for anything, but she treats him worse than dirt." Chioma shook her head sadly. "She treats everyone like that. But you're right. With him, it's different. It's like she goes out of her way to humiliate him." What they didn't understand was that every time Victoria looked at Emmanuel, something inside her twisted. Something about his eyes reminded her of her childhood, of abandonment, a pain. She couldn't explain it, but seeing him triggered a rage she couldn't control. 2 weeks later, Victoria had to redo an entire floor plan because a client changed their specifications. She was furious, stressed, and looking for someone to blame. That evening, as Emmanuel was mopping the hallway near her office, she stormed out and nearly bumped into him. "Watch where you're going," she shouted, even though she was the one who hadn't looked. "I'm very sorry, madam," Emmanuel said, stepping back quickly.
Sorry?
"You're always sorry. Maybe if you paid attention, you wouldn't be such a useless waste of space." She grabbed his mop bucket and kicked it, sending dirty water splashing across the floor. "Clean it up, all of it. And if it's not perfect in 10 minutes, you're fired." Emmanuel got down on his knees, his old joints aching, and began wiping up the water with his bare hands because she had kicked his mop away. As he worked, he whispered under his breath, "Forgive her, Lord. She doesn't know. She doesn't know." The worst incident happened on a Friday afternoon. Victoria had just lost a major contract worth millions. The competitor had undercut her bid, and she was livid. She called an emergency meeting and screamed at her entire team for an hour straight, blaming everyone for the failure. After they filed out, defeated and humiliated, she sat in her office seething. That's when she heard it. The gentle squeak of Emmanuel's cleaning cart in the hallway. Something inside her snapped. She marched out and confronted him. "You," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Do you have any idea how much money I lost today?" Emmanuel looked confused.
No, madam.
"I'm sorry to hear that you. Of course you don't know. You're just a janitor. You probably can't even count that high." Her voice rose to a scream. "This is all because of incompetent people like you. You're old, you're slow, you're useless. You make this entire building look bad." Other employees began gathering, watching in horror. Chioma stepped forward. "Madam, please. He didn't do anything wrong. Stay out of this." Victoria whirled on her. Then she turned back to Emmanuel and did the unthinkable. She grabbed his cleaning supplies and hurled them down the hallway. Spray bottles shattered. Rags scattered everywhere. The cart toppled over with a loud crash. "You're fired. Get out of my building. Get out of my sight. I don't ever want to see your pathetic face again." The hallway was completely silent. Everyone stood frozen, shocked by the cruelty they had just witnessed. Emmanuel slowly bent down and began picking up his scattered supplies. His hands were shaking badly now. Tears streamed down his face, but he said nothing. Victoria stood there, breathing hard, her fists clenched. I said leave. Now. Emmanuel straightened up, leaving most of his supplies on the floor. He looked directly at Victoria for the first time, really looked at her and said, I'm sorry, madam. I'm so sorry I wasn't good enough for you. Just like I wasn't good enough 30 years ago. Victoria's eyes widened. What did you say? But Emmanuel was already walking toward the elevator, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The elevator doors closed, and he was gone. Victoria stood there, her mind racing. What did he mean by that? 30 years ago? Before she could process it, Chioma approached nervously. Madam, I think you should see something. Her voice was barely a whisper. Not now, Chioma. I'm not in the mood. Please, madam. It's important. Chioma held out an old newspaper clipping and a faded photograph. Victoria snatched them impatiently. Where did you get these? I found them in his locker when I went to get his contact information for HR. I think you need to read it. The newspaper was yellow with age, dated 30 years ago. The headline read, Local carpenter gives up daughter to save her life. Man leaves baby at church after wife dies in childbirth. Victoria's eyes scanned the article frantically. It described a poor carpenter named Emmanuel Okafor whose wife had died giving birth to their daughter. Unable to afford food or medicine, he had made the heartbreaking decision to leave his baby at St. Mary's Catholic Church with a note, hoping the church would give her the life he couldn't. The photo showed a much younger Emmanuel, tears streaming down his face, holding a baby wrapped in the exact same faded blanket Victoria had been found in. The same blanket that the nuns had saved and given to her when she turned 18. The same blanket that still sat in a box in her closet. Victoria's hands began to shake uncontrollably. No, this can't be real. This is a coincidence. It has to be. Chioma's voice was gentle. Madam, the date matches. The church matches. The blanket matches. And I saw him looking at your photo on the wall last week. He was crying. The newspaper slipped from Victoria's fingers and fluttered to the floor. Her legs gave out and she collapsed into a chair. All the cruelty she had inflicted on him flashed through her mind like a nightmare. The insults, the humiliation, the way she had thrown his supplies down the hallway and fired him. Her father. She had been torturing her own father. Where does he live? Victoria's voice was barely audible. I have his address here. 30 minutes later, Victoria's Range Rover pulled up to a neighborhood she had never ventured into before. The streets were unpaved. Naked children played in the dirt. The smell of burning trash hung in the air. She found Emmanuel's building, a crumbling structure with rusted metal sheets for walls. Her hands shook as she climbed the narrow stairs to his room. She knocked softly. Mr. Emmanuel? Are you there? The door opened slowly. Emmanuel stood there, still in his work uniform, his eyes red from crying. When he saw Victoria, his face crumpled.
I'm sorry, madam.
I will collect my things from the office tomorrow. I did not mean to upset you. Why didn't you tell me? Victoria's voice broke. Why didn't you say anything? Emmanuel looked down at his worn shoes. Because I wanted you to be happy and free. A poor father would only remind you of the past you worked so hard to escape. I just wanted to see you, to know that you survived, to know that my sacrifice meant something. Your sacrifice? Victoria's tears started falling. You gave me up. You abandoned me. No. Emmanuel's voice was firm for the first time. I saved you. Your mother died bringing you into this world. I had nothing. No money. No food. No medicine. You were sick, burning with fever, and I couldn't afford to take you to the hospital. I held you in my arms and watched you suffering, and I knew that if you stayed with me, you would die. So I wrapped you in your mother's blanket, the only thing of value we owned. I kissed your forehead, prayed over you, and I left you where I knew you would be found and cared for. His voice broke completely. Do you know what it's like to walk away from your own child? To hear her crying behind you and force yourself not to turn around? I stood across the street and watched until the nuns found you. I watched them pick you up and carry you inside. And then I walked home to an empty room and cried for 3 days straight. Victoria couldn't breathe. But why come work for me now? Why come back into my life? Because 10 years ago, I saw your face in a business magazine. The article said you had built Okonkwo Industries from nothing, that you were an orphan who became successful. I recognized your mother's eyes. I recognized the small star-shaped birthmark on your neck that the photograph captured. So I saved money for years to move to Lagos. I took the janitor job just to be near you, just to see if you were happy, just to know that my little girl had survived. Victoria fell to her knees in that tiny room with its cracked walls and leaking ceiling. I've been a monster to you. I humiliated you. I abused you. I fired you. My own father. Emmanuel knelt beside her and placed his weathered hands on her shoulders. My daughter, there is nothing to forgive. You didn't know. And besides, I have spent 30 years praying for your success, your strength, your survival. If becoming hard was what you needed to survive, then I thank God for your hardness. But now you know the truth. And the truth can set you free from the pain that's been eating you alive. They held each other and cried. 30 years of separation, pain, and longing poured out in that moment. The CEO and the janitor, the abandoned child and the father who had sacrificed everything. Finally together. 3 months later, Okonkwo Industries looked different. Victoria had changed. She greeted her employees by name now. She asked about their families. When Chioma's mother got sick, Victoria personally paid for her treatment. When the security guard's son needed school fees, she wrote the check herself. Emmanuel no longer worked as a janitor. He worked in the community outreach department, helping Victoria build a foundation for abandoned children and elderly workers. Together, they created programs to help single parents who were struggling just like Emmanuel had struggled 30 years ago. One afternoon, they stood together in her office looking out at the city. Emmanuel smiled. I'm proud of you, my daughter. Not because you're successful, but because you've learned that true strength isn't in power or wealth. It's in humility and compassion. Victoria squeezed his hand. You taught me that, Papa. You taught me that real love means sacrifice. Sometimes, God places the people we need most in our lives disguised as the people we think were beneath us. Victoria almost lost her father forever because she was too proud and too wounded to see the truth standing right in front of her. She learned the hardest lesson of all, that the person you hurt today might be the very person who saved your life yesterday. Treat everyone with kindness, respect, and dignity because you never know who they really are or what they've sacrificed for you. The person scrubbing your floors might be an angel in disguise. The person you ignore might hold the key to your healing. What did you learn from this story? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more powerful life lessons. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. Until next time, remember that compassion is not weakness. It's the greatest strength of all.